Hello and welcome back to another episode of the DIYguy.net. Alright, today we're going to be showing you how to replace your well pump pressure switch. This is it right here. It's usually located on where your well pipe comes into your house, next to your bladder tank and off the T of it. What this does is actually control when your well pump turns on and off, depending on the pressure within your system. The reason we're replacing this one is the contacts are burnt out, which are causing this pump to go on and off at all different pressures. Sometimes it doesn't engage at all, and other times it'll go well over the 60-pound cutoff on this switch, over pressurizing the system and causing the hot water heater blow-off valve to go off and leak water all over. A couple other reasons are there is no cover. So right here on these terminals we have 220 volts where someone can easily touch that and get electrocuted. They also have no hold to hold this conduit into this, so the wires can get chafed on the pressure switch or the end of the conduit. Same thing on the other side. They do have a holder there, but there's no nut holding it within the box, so those wires can get chafed as well. There's also no shielding on these wires, so they're just bare wires, so they can easily get nicked or caught on something here. So we're going to try to cover those as well. But the main reason we're replacing it is the cutoff switch is not engaging and disengaging at the correct pressures. Alright, so the first step would be to carefully pull the cover off. Like I said, these wires are live. Snap a picture with your cell phone, because the wires need to go back in the same location they are. On this particular switch, the feed wires, or the wires coming from our breaker, are on the outside, 110 each, so it makes the 220. When the switch is contacted, it sends the power out the two middle ones, the red and black wire on this one, right here, going out through the wall with the pipe to the well pump. So we can go ahead and test it to make sure I'm correct. We'll put our 110 test meter on both the outside legs, and as you see, I have 240 volts. So those are our supply wires, or the wires coming from our breaker powering the switch. So next, what we want to do is go ahead and locate the breaker that says well pump, shut that off. For us, there's a service disconnect right at the end of this hard conduit going up the wall. So we'll go ahead and shut that off. We'll go ahead and make sure it's off with our 110 test meter. Alright, so now that we have the breaker off, we can go ahead and test to ensure that it's off. We'll put it back on our terminals. As you can hear, there's no voltage there. We can also test each leg to ground, or the pressure switch itself, to ensure that we have both legs off and 110 is not on one leg. So we have the power totally off. The next step, we've got a flat screwdriver in this case. Remove all the wires off our ground screw and the top of our terminals and get them out of the pressure switch. Alright, so we got the wires removed from our pressure switch, as you can see. We're ready to drain down the system now. What we need to do is alleviate all the pressure. That way when we remove this switch, we don't get soaking wet. Unfortunately for us, as you can see, we have no drain valve or boiler drain, so we can attach our garden hose and drain down the system. So in this case, we're going to have to go upstairs. We'll run the faucets for as long as we can. The lowest one as possible, drain as much off of the house and the pressure as we can. Then we'll come back down, we'll close this valve here to isolate it from the house. Then we'll go ahead and undo that union a little bit and let it drip out of there as we get a wet vac and suck it up. If you had that boiler drain, you can isolate your house. Maybe you have one on the other side, you can isolate it from your pump just by your tank. Attach your garden hose, open your boiler drain valve, and go ahead and drain it outside or into a floor drain. Alright, so we're running the faucets. As you can see, the pressure gauge is slowly going down. So we'll let it run until the pressure gauge is pinned out on the bottom pin and there's nothing else coming out of the faucets. Then we'll go ahead and close the valve here so we can isolate it from the house. Once we did that, we'll go ahead and crack that union loose a little bit, let the water come out, and like I said, use that shop vac to suck up the water. Alright, so we got the system drained down. We're going to take a couple of minutes to cut in a T, an adapter, and then install the boiler drain or drain valve. That way next time we can just use a garden hose and drain it down if we need to service it, whether we need to replace the pressure switch again or the actual well tank or bladder tank itself. So next we're ready to glue on our boiler drain. We attached our fitting here using some Blue Monster Teflon tape, a little bit of gasola. We tightened this together. That way when we glue it on we can get the right orientation we want. We're probably just going to keep it flat, so the hose bib is going, off even, not towards the ground, making it harder to get the hose on. Alright, so now that we have our new boiler drain installed, so next time we need to drain the system, we're not going to have to crack open that unit and use a shop vac. Like I said, if we ever have to change the tank itself or the pressure switch again, it'll make it a little bit easier. Alright, so next we're ready to actually remove the pressure switch. I'll readjust the camera a little bit. There's a nut here and we want to hold this little standpipe underneath it and thread the pressure switch off that little piece of pipe. Then we'll go ahead and set up the new one. Alright, so we're going to tuck these wires out of the way hopefully. Alright, I'll get the wires away. We'll grab a pair of vice grips because we don't have another pair of channel locks handy. I'll make sure it's just on the stem. I'll grab a pair of channel locks, get it onto the nut right at the bottom of the pressure switch. Give it a few turns to loosen it up, and then we should be able to remove it by hand. So like I said, the reason this one was failing is these contacts are almost all gone. You'll see the difference in the new one. I'm not sure if the camera can pick it up, but they're all arced out and black. And this side's actually half gone and worn, kind of uneven. So another thing that'll cause the pressure to be wacky is some of these have a screen in the bottom of them. Depending on how much iron you have in there, it clogs that screen and it can't read the pressure that's in the pipe. So that is another thing. You may just be able to take yours off and clean inside of there, but they're not that expensive. If you already went through that work, you might as well just replace it with a new one. Alright, so now that we got our threads clean, we'll go ahead and apply some new Teflon tape on there. Be careful not to cover the nipple here, as you want to make sure you get an accurate reading. Alright, now that we got our Teflon on, we'll take a little bit of gasola, the soft set thread sealant here, and we'll put a little dab around the outside as well, just to make sure we don't have any leaks. Like I said, we don't want to get it into the top of the nipple, we just want it around on the threads. Alright, so we got our new switch. This one's a pump troll. Undo the little nut here, remove our cover. You want to match your switch up to your old switch. You can tell right in here, it'll also say on the packaging when you buy it. Right in here it says 40/60. So this one turns on at 40 and goes off at 60. That's the most newer house models. If you had an older one, it'd be a 30/50, so it would go on at 30 and off at 50. You can adjust these numbers, but you're best to match it off with what you got in your house already. So that being said, we are ready to grab the base part of our switch. I'll show you these contacts compared to the other ones. You can see how much copper is on there, or copper color, compared to what the other ones isn't, and these springs are nice and firm. So you want to make sure this is nice and clean, and we can go ahead and start threading it on. Turn our vice grips around. Grab our channel locks. Give a few more turns so we can get the orientation the way we want. Alright, so next we're ready to reinstall our wires. We got the adapter we needed to put this conduit into our actual switch. And on the other side I have some watertight sheathing, so I'll go ahead and cut a piece of that and the fitting to fit the box. That way we can kind of cover those wires up and give them some protection. So we'll start with the ones coming from our breaker first. Get our adapter on there. Alright, so we'll get the wires in there. Put the nut. Slide it over our wires. Don't forget to go over your ground wire. And then we'll put it onto our adapter here. That way we can ensure the wires don't chafe up. Go ahead and tighten this screw to the conduit to hold the conduit in that adapter. Alright, so now that we got our adapter tightened up to our conduit, we're ready to install those wires. Those are the ones coming from our breaker panel supplying the switch. So those are going to be our outer two lugs. So we're going to go ahead and attach those wires there, and also attach our ground screw down here in the back. Keep in mind which way your wire is hooked, as when you tighten the screw you want the hook to be the right way, going clockwise. That way when you tighten it, it actually draws it in rather than pushing it out of the screw. Alright, so now that we have the breaker wires attached to our switch and our ground, we're ready to attach the pump wires over here. For that, we're going to use this ultra tight empty conduit. We're going to go ahead and slip that over the wires. That way it'll give them some kind of protection to make sure they don't get nicked or something get caught on them and create a nick in the insulation where they could arc out. Alright, so we went with the straight connector just because we couldn't get this solid copper ground wire through that 90 without messing it up too much. So we're just going to make a little loop within the flexible part of the conduit. Go ahead and put that into our pump switch and then install our nut on that fitting. So now that we got our pump wires into our pump switch, we'll go ahead and fold those out of the way. We'll go ahead and attach our ground to the box first. Then we'll go ahead and attach our two pump leads to the center terminals on our pump switch. Alright, so now that we have our ground wire attached to our pump side, we're going to go ahead and attach our pump wires to the middle of the switch. Like I said, keep in mind which way the hook or the orientation is, so when you tighten your screw, it actually tightens it underneath rather than push it out. Now we got all our wires connected. We got our outside wires coming from our breaker, both of them, and our inside wires, both of them coming from the pump connected. We have both our grounds coming from the breaker panel and going out to the pump, all connected to our box. So we'll go ahead and show you how the pressure switch operates. You have this large spring here in the center with the nut and the bolt and the higher threaded rod. If you take a 3/8 nut driver with a hollow stem and actually tighten that nut down, you'll increase your range. So like I said, this one is a 40/60 set from the factory. So if we were to turn that 4 or 5 times, it would increase that range to 44, 45, up to 64, 65. So that does your range adjustment. The shorter one off to the right side here, same thing, a 3/8 nut driver with a hollow stem. If you were to tighten that one down, that would do your high limit or high water cutoff. So if you wanted to leave it at 40 as your kick in, but say you wanted to shut it off at 65 on the high side, you would tighten that one 4 or 5 turns to increase your cutoff pressure. So that is how the well pump pressure switch operates. Alright, so next we'll go to the top of the bladder tank. We'll remove this small cover over our air fitting. Looks kind of like a tire valve stem. That is where you add air to the bladder with inside the well tank. So we'll go ahead and grab a good gauge. We're going to use this Blue Point one here, snap on. We want a trusted gauge that works so we can tell what pressure is really in there. As you can see, this one is 32 psi. So this is a little bit low, as we want it to be 2 pounds below our cut-in, and this switch is a 40/60, so we want the psi inside the bladder tank to be 38 psi. So we're going to go ahead and grab our air compressor and our air fitting and go ahead and charge this up till it is 38 pounds of pressure in that bladder tank. Alright, so now that we have the correct pressure, 38 psi within our bladder tank or our well tank, we can go ahead and reinstall the cover over the top of that valve to keep it nice and clean. Next, we'll go down below. We'll double check to make sure our boiler drain's closed, the valve isolating the pump from the house. We'll also double check that union, as we had to crack that loose to drain the system in the first place. Once we have those all secure, that are not going to leak, we can go ahead and turn the breaker on, energizing the well pump. In this case, we're going to turn on the service disconnect. You should see the gauge slowly go up, as you can see here, and the pump switch start to work or put tension on that spring. Once we have that charged up, we'll go ahead and double check the boiler drain, the union, anywhere else, just to make sure we have no leaks underneath the pump switch itself. Once we have no leaks there, we can go ahead and open the valve, pressurizing the house. Once we have that open, we'll go ahead and go upstairs and run some faucets or a hose. What we want to do is get all the air out of the system. And we also want to cycle the pump switch on and off a few times to see where it's turning on and where it's turning off. This is a 40/60 switch, so it should be pretty close to 40 when the pump turns on and 60 when it shuts off. So let's just let the hose run and watch it cycle a few times to see where those numbers are and see if we need to actually get that 3/8 nut driver and adjust it on the top of our pump switch. Alright, so as you can see, this well pump is cycling perfect. It's kicking on at 40, shutting off at 60, and that is what the factory setting is on this switch. So we don't need any adjustment on this one. So we can go ahead and grab the cover that covers our terminals, slide it back on. We'll tighten that little nut down to hold it in position. Alright, so we'll go ahead and double check the union just to ensure we don't have any leaks there. We'll check around our pressure switch where that connection is to make sure there's no leaks or drips under there. We'll also check where we cut in the boiler drain here, where we glued it, checked all those joints, and also where we threaded the boiler drain onto to ensure that we don't have any leaks there. And that's it. We just showed you how to replace your well pump pressure switch. Don't forget to click the link in the description, which will take you to our website for a full write-up. You can also click that subscribe button in the middle. On the right, we have a recommended video just for you. And on the left, you'll find our recent upload. Thanks for watching another episode of the DIYguy.net.